Okay, good evening everyone. It's approached 7 o'clock, our commencement time, so I can welcome you all this evening to tonight's council meeting. Agendas have been circulated. If you've got one next to you, please take it, and if there's not enough to go around, can you please share with your neighbour next to you. You can leave at the conclusion of your item if you come to listen to a particular one, and if you have your mobile phones, can you please switch them off or put them on silent. And once again, welcome to you all. The membership is as listed. Do we have any apologies from council tonight? We do have Councillor Greco who's running late for tonight's meeting, so we'll note him as a late starter. Item 3 for consideration is disclosure of conflicts of interest. Any conflicts of interest from councillors this evening?
No, Mr. Mayor.
No conflicts, thank you, councillors. Item 4, confirmation of the minutes of the previous council meetings. Moved Councillor Williams, second Councillor Sertis. Put that to a vote. All those in favour? That's carried. Thank you, councillors. Next item is number 5, public question time. So I'll read out several questions which have been lodged online today, and I thank members of the community who have lodged those, and I'll provide responses when their question is read. We have Damien Kingsbury from Thornbury who's asked me to read his out, and I acknowledge his attendance in the gallery, and I'll provide an answer. Question is, at a time when rate capping has put pressure on essential Darebin Council services to the community, and Council has not yet committed to funds to conserving for public use of former Ruthven Primary School site and 1.8 hectares of land adjoining Murray Creek at the former Lakeside Secondary College. Question, has Council cut $42,000 from the historic Bundoora homestead and or its associated arts centre and considering closing it a day a week? Our response is, there's been no cut in the budget for Bundoora homestead or the associated arts program. There have been numerous discussions with the Board of Management over a year regarding the draft business plan, with strategies to build and grow the service currently being delivered at the homestead. There are a number of strategic drivers that provide a solid foundation for meeting community demands and aspirations for the centre that the plan outlines. Discussions have not included a 1 day per week closure. However, a more general brainstorm of options has been discussed in light of rate capping and looking to scope new ideas from the new board membership, which had its first meeting at July 20. The draft business plan has not yet been presented to Council, as the new board has only been introduced to the draft last month, and have agreed to workshop ideas and formulate a final plan for Council endorsement this year. That's the response. Our next question from Damien is, further, will it entertain the fiscally irresponsible idea of spending $10 million as endorsed by Councillor Trent McCarthy and reported in the Leader Community News to purchase a former bank building and theatre site in Rucker Ward for the purpose of creating artist hubs, when there is already a large arts and entertainment centre located on the corner of Bell Street and St George's Road? That item's actually been up to be considered tonight, so this matter will be considered when it comes up as a notice of motion, so we really can't comment at this stage. So we thank Damien for those questions. The question here from David Redfern from Northcote. He's asked me to read his out. He's also in the gallery. While I acknowledge and in fact embrace the critical importance of the arts to the social and economic well-being of our community, as well as Darebin's Council support for this sector, given the current fiscal constraints on local government and the fact that there is already significant public arts infrastructure in Darebin, e.g. the Darebin Arts and Entertainment Centre, partly funded by the Keating Government, Bundoora Homestead, the Creative and Digital Arts Incubator and the Northcote Town Hall, redeveloped with substantial funding from the Bracks Government. What would be the impact on the recently adopted council budget on the purchase of the 2 major buildings reported in the Northcote Leader, given the price tag of up to $10 million? What the community priorities may have to make way for such purchases, and is this normal practice for consideration of major items of expenditure? As for the previous response, this matter will be considered when it comes up through the notice of motion section of the agenda, so we'll decide and debate it then. And we also have questions from Serena O'Malley, who I've just noticed you've attended from Reservoir. Would you like to read yours out, Serena? Thank you. Thank you. If you can stand, please, and read your question, we'll provide a response. Thank you.
Thank you. Just had to rush from work, so I'm a bit puffed. Why did Darebin Council not consult the community before discontinuing written responses to questions that are verbally answered on the night of council meetings? Noting that many residents do not have electronic access to the minutes or sufficient mobility to travel to read the minutes, will Council reinstate formal written responses as a matter of urgency?
Thank you. Council's governance local law only requires a written response to be provided if the question is taken on notice. The committee will be given an opportunity to have input to public question time when the local governance law is reviewed and put to the committee consultation when the new council is elected. Next question, Serena.
This question is really about the continuing delays in the process of purchasing the former school sites in Darebin, and it's in relation to the valuation. Why is Darebin Council undertaking a separate valuation of the former Ruthven Primary School site and 1.8 hectares of land adjoining the Merry Creek at the former Lakeside Secondary College, rather than using the Valuer General's valuation for the land? On what zoning or zonings is Darebin Council undertaking its valuation?
Thank you for that. Our response is, Council is not undertaking a separate valuation for the surplus Victorian Government land at the former Ruthven Primary School. As there is no current Valuer General approved valuation for the land, Council has offered to issue joint valuation instructions with the Department of Education. Council understands that the Victorian Government is seeking for the land to be valued on the basis of highest and best use. The Department of Education have advised that they will be instructing the valuers to use the proposed GRZ2 zoning and development overlay when assessing the underlying value of the land. Okay, so what I'll also do is respond to you and ask you if you would like to meet with us to discuss any further issues in relation to those matters, in relation to the questions asked, but I'll also provide to the Ombudsman answers that I've presented to you this evening for response to their inquiries about letters you've written to them. So I'll be welcoming you to meet with myself and the CEO on other matters in relation to these questions. Thank you, Serena. Okay, there is another question from Michelle McCorkle, who has sent this via email. Could we please have an update on what is happening with the new playgrounds at Newman, Turner and AH Cap reserves? Council website states that they will be finished by 30th of June, but that has not happened. Our response is, the play space at Turner Reserve is nearly complete with our contractor rectifying some small detail work that we weren't satisfied with before we opened to the public in coming weeks. The play spaces at Newman Reserve and AH Cap Reserve have been delayed due to unexpected contractor delays. Council staff are negotiating a speedy completion of these projects with the contractor. The Council website has been updated to reflect this information and we thank you for your patience. Staff contact details are provided to you to enable you to contact them for further details or inquiries on this matter. And they're the responses to the questions which have been submitted online for 4 o'clock today. We thank the residents for those. Now, are there any other questions from the floor? I'll take questions from the floor. I understand Peter Thompson, you have one. Thank you, Peter. If you can stand and read the question. Yes, we'd like that, please, for audio, for the audio. Yes, we do, Peter.
Peter Thompson, Reservoir.
Peter, can you hold up for the audio, because it's actually being broadcast. We actually need it.
For the internet.
Yeah. So, Mr Mayor, councillors, officers, my request is for, on behalf of the Wurundjeri tribe, that you consider the old library in Rull Street Reservoir as a possibility, even though you claim that it's derelict and fallen down or whatever, that it be pressed into their use by whatever arrangement. They would dearly like to move into Darebin. They have considered numerous other sites, however this one was the most attractive. I submit therefore to you tonight that you consider this and put action where words are.
Thank you very much for that question, Peter. We'll take it on notice and we'll actually speak with members of the Wurundjeri Council in relation to that matter. Thank you very much. Okay, if there's no further questions, we'll proceed with tonight's meeting. Thank you very much, members of the gallery. You can stay for the duration of the meeting or leave at your leisure once your item has been discussed.
Mr Mayor, on your indulgence.
Yes, Councillor Soudis.
I'd like to make a statement, if I can, of my own. A little while ago, I emailed all fellow councillors and, of course, officers in relation to a decision that was taken pretty much as a family concern. So, after a long journey, I'm announcing my retirement at the next council election. The journey has been a long one, and obviously I've shared the journey with yourself, Mr Mayor, and Councillor Lawrence over, probably the better part of...
Since last century, Councillor.
Yes. So I'd like to just offer my thanks, because I think over the journey a lot of fantastic achievements have been done by this council. When you consider what we've been able to achieve since amalgamation, the challenges have been relentless and ongoing. And I have no doubt, even with the flavour of the questions that you've just received, Mr Mayor, in the context of a rate-capping environment, those challenges will be even greater for the new council, however it may be constituted. But I want to just say that I've been privileged, I suppose, to be given an opportunity twice to serve on this council, having lost in 2002 representing the Latrobe ward, and then coming back through the Rucker ward where I live. There are personal milestones, they're on the record, but I think in terms of the collective work that we've done here, we can hold our heads up pretty high in terms of what we've been able to achieve here. This council is financially in the strongest possible position in order to withstand those challenges going into the next term, and that's largely because of the work that we've done. I think in terms of the social policy areas that we've touched upon, even during the last 4 or 5 years, stand testament to that. I think of things that I've tried to sponsor here and have been warmly embraced by the whole council, like Keon Children's Hub, and of course the Solar Savers Program. So I suppose there's good foundations for the new council to springboard going forward. I just want to offer my sincere thanks and my fervent felicitations to one and all, and good luck to everyone who might be recontesting. I've enjoyed the journey, and I just want to say thank you to the Darebin community as a whole, both from the Latrobe ward residents who elected me in the first instance, sent me home in the second, and of course Rucker ward residents who have given me an opportunity to come back again. I did want to sort of put this final note, Mr Mayor, if I can, and there's a truism that I put out on the email that I suppose the longer you stay in an elected position, the closer you are towards the end, whether voluntarily or involuntarily. My family has decided that it's best that I choose voluntarily. So, although the decision was involuntary in many respects, given the family decision, they chose Dexit, and on that note, it's picking up on the worldwide theme, but I can assure you of one thing, you know, at least as far as this chapter is concerned of my life, it's closing in October. But I did say one thing, even as we're getting closer, Mr Mayor, that I look forward to the future development of this city, whether I'm on this council or not. And I can assure you one thing, when I look around in terms of the development, it stands as a testament in terms of the modernisation and the renewal that's happening out there in the community. And I would encourage those who would become members of this council to embrace it. Because at the end of the day, change stops for no one. And of course, we need to bring the community with us on that journey. That's the challenge for all members of an elected body. One last point, Mr Mayor, if I can, with your indulgence. I picked up on a fantastic quote, and it's easily transplantable to any scenario that an elected person may be involved in. And it goes something like this: we all know what needs to be done, we just don't know how to get re-elected. And that quote was from Jean-Claude Juncker, who's now President of the European Union, and he said that statement when he was Prime Minister of Liechtenstein. So don't be frightened in terms of the hard decisions that need to be made. I mean, I know that some of us here have borne the brunt of community resentment for some of the tough things that we've done. But I can assure you one thing, there is little doubt out there in terms of where people stand in terms of their views of all of us for the decisions that we've made and have not made. But count the cost of what it is not to make those decisions. I think that's our challenge. And in a constrained environment, if I can pick up the thing that was mentioned in the context of the question, the challenge is even greater, and the success, I think, will be even more rewarding for those who will become part of this council going forward. But as far as myself, Mr Mayor, after 17 years, my family has said that's enough. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Seeders. Just a reminder, you're still on the payroll for another 83 days. Right?
Mr Mayor.
And before, Councillor
I just would like to move a brief suspension of standing orders in order to pass a condolence motion.
Yes,
Oh,
thank
yeah,
you.
that's what my number is.
Councillor Lee has moved the suspension of standing orders, seconded by Councillor McCarthy. I'll put that to a vote. All those in favour? That's carried. Councillor Lee.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Sadly, this council and many members of this council were informed of the untimely passing of Mike Hill last week. Mike Hill was the former mayor of City of Brunswick before amalgamation, and after amalgamation he, along with many other mayors, including Ray Perry, now Ray Kingsbury, helped to establish Victorian Local Governance Association, was also on the CEO of VLGA for a number of years. He sadly passed away, and he will be sadly missed by many members of not only his own community but adjoining communities as well, such as one we have here in Darebin. There will be a memorial service for him tomorrow, 11 o'clock at Coburg Town Hall, a public memorial service. So, with your permission, I would like to have a 1 minute standing silence to pay our respects to Mike Hill.
Just 1 minute silence. Thank you very much. Okay.
I move the resumption of standing orders, Mr Mayor.
Councillor Lees move the resumption of standing orders. Councillor McCarthy second. All those in favour? That's carried. We now resume standing orders. Can I also, before we commence our consideration reports, acknowledge the presence of Councillor Ray Kingsbury, former Mayor Councillor Ray Perry, who is now Ray Kingsbury, welcome, and also David Redfern, former Mayor of Northcote. Good to see you here, David, as well. Thank you for attending. We'll now go on to item 6 for tonight, on tonight's agenda, consideration reports. First one being 6.1, the Tourism Destination Plan. Move, Darebin. First on your feet. First on your feet.
I'm happy to second it.
First on Councillor Lees.
Councillor Lees first.
Councillor Wallace second.
Thank you. Obviously, we're all eager to endorse his tourism strategy. Very glad to present the tourism strategy for formal adoption tonight, Mr Mayor. When the issue, or in fact the strategy of tourism was first floated to many people, there was a curious look as if, you know, why are we as a suburban municipality advocating, indeed developing a tourism strategy? Well, there are actually many. If residents would care to flick through attachment 6.1, they'll actually see that tourism is made out of many facets. There is very localised tourism, such as those people who travel between various municipalities to the city of Darebin for visiting friends, catching up with family, or indeed enjoy many of our fine eateries and coffee outlets. There is also regional tourism. I know that there are many residents that travel far away as Seymour, coming to places like the Preston Market, because that's the only place where they can get some hard to find spices and condiments that they cannot find in some of the regional centres. And of course, it also extends to interstate and indeed national and international tourism. This tourism strategy highlights many of the cultural assets we have here in the city of Darebin, including the Islamic Museum, amongst other places, but also some of our fine festivals and art programs that we indeed showcase. And I do particularly highlight the two what I call anchor festivals, such as the Darebin Kite Festival up in Edwards Lake, and also the Christmas Carols at All Nations Park end of every year. These two combined events generate enormous amount of tourism exposure for this council, and it's only rightly that we develop a strategy, because when we do have a tourism strategy that guides our economic development and working with our key stakeholders in order to generate local economy and local jobs and stimulate local jobs. In closing, I do want to thank our officers who work very tirelessly with our business operators and also engaged with our residents through both face-to-face and also on social media and online presence. That overall consultation has resulted in many positive feedbacks, and I believe that this tourism strategy will see the council in a new light. We would certainly assist councillors to see the council in a new light, but hopefully to let other residents see council in a new light as well. Thank you, Mr.
Thank you very much, Councillor Lee. Councillor Glover, anything to add?
Yeah, just very quickly, Mr. Mayor. I think this is a really exciting strategy. We often talk about the economic dimension of a lot of projects that we do, and often what is the case, Mr. Mayor, is that different departments are working in their in silos. And sometimes I think there might be missed opportunities in terms of an economic development opportunity with various projects. For example, you know, promoting the live music scene, which is very much alive, and that council plays a big role in promoting. That is the Darebin Music Festival. There's stuff happening in Darebin Arts and Entertainment Centre. There's lots of things happening that council's involved in. What the strategy seeks to do is kind of bring everything together, join all the dots, so that we can promote all and have a mapping out of all these different events and all these different draw cards, whether it be local visitors or interstate or international, and actually make it work for Darebin. I think this actually makes economic sense, because what we like to see, Mr Mayor, is that an economic development kind of underpinning a lot of such opportunities. So this is very exciting. When you have a look at the statistics in the report, how much money is generated through our creative economy, for example, 32.48 million, because we know that Darebin has a very well-respected and thriving music industry. There's, not to mention our hospitality, the restaurants. There is a lot on offer. And Councillor Lee also mentioned Islamic Museum and those other iconic cultural institutions that are developing. What do we need? We need some infrastructure to help tourists when they come here to navigate their way, promotional material, make sure that Darebin is safe for tourists. So it's an overarching strategy, draws everything together, and it really builds on what's already happening here in Darebin.
Thank you,
Thank you,
Councillor.
Mr Mayor.
Okay, if there's no further comments, I'll put that to Councillor Walsh.
I've got a question. If I wanted to include something else in here, would I need to make an amendment if I wanted that to be considered part of the tourism strategy?
What do you want to do?
I want to add the food truck park and also welcome to Thornbury in hospitality venues, which are considerable, because I do believe they are. I do believe they probably fit the criteria in hindsight.
Well, the recommendation is probably inclusive of those sort of matters and items. The officer can consider that as part of the policy.
Okay, I'll speak briefly on it anyway. Look, this is a fantastic document, and I think that it is one of those things that is. I think it's quite important, and will be very for the future of our city. In the report notes and makes the point that those cities that have the best results in terms of economic development are the ones with good tourist strategies, and we've got a lot of venues with the arts, such as in Northcote. Obviously the town hall and bars along High Street there. Also I'm glad to see Thornbury Theatre as well, and how much they've been able to achieve is also noteworthy as well. And then you look at La Trobe University and other places like this, and I think the question that you've got to ask yourself here is, and you've got to be thinking about, which of these places will people come from, obviously outside Darebin, but will come from all over Melbourne, all over the state, just to come to these venues, and that's what we've got to be trying to build here.
Thank you, Councillor Walsh. Councillor Williams.
Just very quickly, I just want to say, look, the tourism destination plan for Darebin is actually to enhance the visitor's experience, whether that's fashion, whether you go down to the Diana Ferrari, or go see Catherine Manuel with the handbags, or the best pizza in the world, which is down in Wood Street, or the first built mosque in the heart of Melbourne. All this is actually supporting our businesses in the area, and what it actually does is it has a real plan, a goal to actually show that we are a vibrant city and that we're a healthy and connected community, thriving with an extreme diversity in creative culture in Darebin.
Thank you, Councillor Williams.
May I just note, due to Councillor Greco is an apology, but he did circulate a possible, an additional point, which I think is fairly straightforward one, which I think might
It's
be...
been circulated like a
It's
further
been circulated?
Happy to...
It's been circulated.
At 6:35.
Well, the mover, Councillor Lee, can accept it.
It's just the council receive an annual progress report.
Yep.
Yes, absolutely.
That's
Yeah.
accepted. Okay, so we'll include that as an additional point on the recommendation.
Thank you.
Do you wish to speak, Councillor?
Yeah,
Lawrence?
just briefly. This report, I welcome this report and the framework that it presents. And it in some ways comes at the end of our term, 4-year term. So, and it has a date. It's fairly ambitious in terms of when it's been adopted. But I would sort of note that this is the first framework in this strategy, and one of the underlying themes of this is in fact the cross-cultural experience of Darebin. And it's a very rich cross-cultural experience that covers things like the Islamic Museum through to Aboriginal landmarks that we've got mentioned, like the Spiritual Walk. But there is a lot of hidden treasures in Darebin that are yet to be added to this, and they include both new emerging communities who are creating unique things here, plus some hidden Aboriginal history which is yet to be explored. So I would commend that we actually develop this further.
Thank you, Councillor Lawrence. I'll put that to a vote. All those in favour? That's carried. Thank you, councillors. Next item we're considering. Thank you, Councillor Greco. Welcome. Do you have any conflicts on tonight's agenda, Councillor Greco?
No.
Thank you, Councillor Greco.
My
Next item.
apologies for being late.
That's fine. That's fine. Next item is 6.2, the energy efficient streetlight project. Move Councillor McCarthy. Second, Councillor Seeders. Councillor McCarthy, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Councillors would be aware that we have undertaken some enormous amounts of activity over recent years in relation to replacing our streetlights with the energy efficient models, and we're not alone in doing this. Darebin was one of the first councils to sign on to the Give Us the Green Light campaign, which was jointly organised through the Municipal Association of Victoria. And in fact, in 2013, we received funding for this project, which some councillors may recall was hard fought for and very, very much well appreciated. Where we are in space and time, of course, is that we have undertaken work. We now have the progress report. There is more work to be done with these sorts of projects, and obviously monitoring in terms of the existing installations that have occurred. And just to give councillors some context, this has gone on for over a decade, our advocacy to get to this point, because we know that when you change over your streetlights and you replace them with energy efficient ones, the payback period is very impressive. And councillors would see from the report that we are making savings and we will continue to make savings. This is infrastructure which is not owned by us, but it's in our interests to actually replace it. So really what we have here is a progress report in terms of the financial and environmental impacts as a result of this work that's been undertaken, but probably critically looking forward, where do we go from here? So how do we want to shift or change our arrangements when it comes to street lighting in the future, and how do we take the learnings of a project of this scale into other areas of council's infrastructure as well? Because if we can save that amount of money when it comes to changing over our streetlights, what are the sort of savings that we can make in relation to other areas? And that's money that we can reinvest into our social and cultural life. And I think that's something that residents and ratepayers would want to see. So I'll end it there. The report's there for councillors, and I commend the work of our officers and the many community members who've been involved in lobbying for this over many years.
Thank you, Councillor McCarthy. Councillor Seeders.
Thanks, Mr Mayor. This project actually brings a little bit of a smile to me, because I remember vividly on budget night how there was an attempt to actually borrow this amount of money, which I actually fought against. And there was real money to actually spend on the project. So I draw councillors' attention to page 19, you'll notice why I'm smiling. No borrowings, no interest paid, and real money saved. If that's the true rate of return in terms of the savings to council, it indicates that by the middle of perhaps next year or even towards the end of next year, basically the outlays of council, as contained in the table on page 20, would have been fully paid off. So of course, the ongoing savings are there. So that stands testament in terms of the project. There was no argument in terms of the validity of it, particularly when the Commonwealth had given us almost $2 million. I would note, rather Labor government money towards that end. So a good social outcome. I suppose just to finish off, in a note of caution, the residual amount of lights left open, and also back on page 19, Mr Mayor, under options for consideration. The story associated with something like 2,500 lights, I should say, is not as impressive in the absence of federal government assistance. So I suppose it will be a watching brief for the new council, and particularly if there are any sources of funds to be accessed either through the state government. I note, for instance, in recent times the Premier has made an announcement towards the state government's goal of carbon neutrality towards, I think it was 2050 or something, I forget the number, but it indicates that there's money to be had, and it will be up to the council to go and advocate and lobby for that money if it is to retire the remaining ones. And I note, of course, the different statutory authorities that need to negotiate towards that end, particularly Vic Roads. And I'll leave it there, Mr Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Sertis. Councillor Villala.
Mr Mayor, I'm talking in favour, well, obviously, of the report, but I just do want to note there has been one hiccup that I'm aware of, and I suppose it's just that comes with change. On page 18, bottom paragraph, it does talk about communication, that 3,800 letters were sent, and there were requests to review 103 of the proposed light removals. And I'm just aware of a number of residents who complained because the light that was in front of their home was removed, and now we, like I think other councillors, would have encouraged the respective residents to put in an appeal, and I think most of them were addressed. 64 out of the 103 who sought to have their matter reviewed, 64 of these lights have been reinstated or retained. So I just sort of wonder why, just to have that number of complaints. There's, even though I know that there were a couple of cases where it was reviewed and it was shown that the amount of light is according to Australian standards, etc., etc. There is an issue about public perception of safety, and sometimes it's difficult for us to be. We can be objective, which we have to be, but the resident is talking from a subjective point of view, and I think sometimes we're a bit. Maybe too little bit officious in the implementation of this, and we had to be a bit more responsive to maybe the real human experiences of our residents. So I think that's a bit disappointing, and maybe we could correct that. Thank you, Mr Mayor.
Councillor Greco.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Look, I also want to support this particular motion, and also support the report that comes with this recommendation. I just want to point out that this is one of those instances where it's a win for the environment, it's a win for the community, it's also a win for the council in terms of there will be over $500,000 worth of savings on our electricity bill as a result of the replacement of these lights. But I don't want to repeat the points that have been made by other councils in relation to the positive aspects of this particular program, but I'd just like to highlight something there on page 19 of this report, where it talks about there's over 2,000 street lights that are controlled by Vic Roads that still need to be addressed, that still need to be changed. And what's important about this is that not only are they Vic Roads, but we are paying 40% of the electricity bill on those roads. Now, I'm sure that if we had control over those lights, we would be changing them fairly rapidly, because we're the ones left carrying the tab. So I think we really have to back the MAV, the Municipal Association of Victoria's call to actually get Vic Roads to get their act together, and we may need to be putting pressure on the state government that in order to ensure that Vic Roads cooperates with council so that we could quickly replace those lights so we can get even a greater savings towards the council. Apart from that, I'm hoping that we can put a push in that direction, but apart from that, great sort of initiative both financially and for the environment.
Thank you, Councillor Greco. I'll put that item to a vote. All those in favour? That item's carried. Thank you, councillors. Next item is 6.3, proposed road discontinuance at the rear of 47 and 49 Durham Boulevard and 66 Dundee Street Reservoir. Recommendation moved by Councillor Villala. Have a seconder? Councillor Greco. Councillor Villala.
Oh, look, Mr Mayor, this is a pretty straightforward matter. There is one interested party in the land on the rear of 47 and 49 Darabin Boulevard and 66 Dundee Street. So it's not a complicated process, and this is just to commence the statutory procedures. So it's pretty straightforward. Thank you, Mr Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Villala. Councillor Greco.
And nothing further to add, Mr.
Thank
Mayor.
you, Councillor. Councillor Lee.
Just a quick question through you, Mr Mayor. I note that only 49 has expressed an interest. Can I just get some confirmation that part of the proposed declaration closure is not occupied by 47, and if so, are they aware of the consequences of the discontinuance?
Mr CEO.
Mr Hamilton. Through Mr Mayor, I believe both all surrounding residents have been notified. Only more recently that both those properties have got the lane to their rear, so they are aware we just haven't heard back from them, and this process will formalise that notification process.
So it'll be still more to do.
Yep, still more to do.
Yep.
Okay.
Thank you, councillors. I'll put that on to a vote. All those in favour? That's carried. Thank you, councillors. Next item is 6.4, the road adjoining 40 and 42 Pine Street Reservoir. Let's try that again.
Happy to move that, Mr Mayor.
I was first on my feet.
Councillor Villala, first on your feet.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Happy to move it with option 3.
Option 3 on page.
Option 3 on page 30.
Thank you. Moved, Councillor Villala. So the recommendation there is not going to be considered. It's option 3 on page 30. The council provide written advice to the owner confirming that the road located between 40 and 42 Pine Street Reservoir, shown hatched on the plan endorses at Appendix A, is not reasonably required for public use, is not registered as a public road on Council's Registry of Public Roads, Road Management Act 2004, and the land is not otherwise considered to be a public highway. Moved, Councillor Villala. Seconder? Councillor Walsh, thank you. Councillor Villala, you wish to speak?
Oh, look, this is, as this is in the report, Mr Mayor, that the owners of, is it 42 Pine Street, are actually on the title, and so it is rightfully theirs. And what option 3 does is pretty much just finalise some administrative stuff that should have been done years ago, that says that it is not, that the road is not required, and I think if we just make this, we formalise this, it will then go, and we'll be able to make the transaction just go smoothly. Simple as that. Thank you, Mr Mayor.
I will draw to people's attention there was additional information provided to us by the 42 owners solicitor in relation to acquisition of that site over 50 years ago, and administrative error by council officers 50 years ago neglected to form the discontinuance.
Yes.
Okay.
So we're just rectifying
That's
that
what we're
now,
doing.
and it did have that anomaly in the report that there was something quite not right. But
Thank
we
you,
clarified that, Mr Mayor. Thank you.
Okay, if there's no further comment or debate, I'll put that to a vote. All those in favour? Carried. Thank you, councillors. Next item is 6.5, the surplus state government land, 45 Mary Parade, Northcote.
Mr Mayor, I've got an alternative motion which I've put through to the governance officer, which should appear on the screen.
Which has been given to us now, not circulated earlier.
It's identical to what was flagged at the previous meeting, so councillors will be aware of an alternative proposal to that which has been put to us by VicTrack.
Is that Big Trade or Big Trade?
That should read VicTrack.
Yeah, VicTrack. We've had a brief on these councils already, and the offer that has been presented to us isn't what's on the screen. Anyway, I'm in the hands of council. It's moved by Councillor McCarthy as an alternative to the recommendation in the report.
Can I ask a question? May I ask
Yes.
a question? Just a clarification, Councillor McCarthy. Is the the balance to be spent on conservation projects on that land or across all of Darebin?
No, the reference here, if I can clarify for Councillor Villela, would be in relation to that land, and obviously the Mary Creek is the adjoining parcel here. So it's providing an alternative to what VicTrack has proposed, which is $500,000, and instead saying if they need a financial contribution for the purposes of the government's books, then by all means something, but it is currently public land. But it's providing an alternative which actually would see conservation and also those sorts of improvements which the local residents have fought for a long time. So,
are you speaking to it? So if
there's a second, I'm happy to second.
Thank you, Councillor Greco. Councillors may recall this matter came to us at the previous council meeting, and there's been a strong and sustained community campaign to see the protection of this land after it was offered for sale, or rather for opportunities for purchasing to other government authorities, including the Department of Land and Water, and of course also to Melbourne Water as well. Other authorities have declined to purchase it, saying that they are either not interested in taking over the land, they see the inherent environmental value and public value of the land, and that it should not be developed. It also has restrictions over the majority of the land, and therefore the valuation has been reduced from the original stipulated amount of around $1 million to $1.5 million, reduced now to $500,000. That's still quite a lot of money for council to be asked to pay for a piece of land that it has in fact maintained for decades in partnership with the Mary Creek Management Committee, the Friends of Mary Creek, and of course local residents. So the proposal here is that instead of handing over $500,000 for the parcel of land, which it is widely acknowledged by the various local members of Parliament and the other authorities listed in the report, to put an alternative proposal which has not been put on the table at this stage, which is for council to make a financial contribution, but in return to also make a commitment in future budgets to the improvements to the conservation and to the amenity of that section. And of course, councillors would be well aware that there is a huge amount of activity along that stretch known as 45 Mary Parade. It is one of the busiest stretches in Darebin in terms of cyclists and walkers coming off the St George's Road path and of course coming off the Shimmy, and we are now in the process of getting very close to installing a signalised crossing at that point that in fact will connect the Shimmy route from just north of South Crescent, Union Street there, and just to the south there as well, connecting people along from Bridge Street and elsewhere. So this is an alternative proposal which I think will meet one of the needs of government, which is to say that it has sold the land and transferred it to council. It would remain in public hands, but in return council would be able to make a commitment, a financial commitment, which would be part of the contract of sale to expend money on the improvement to that area, and particularly in terms of maintaining the conservation values, but also improving some of the amenity aspects as well. The proposal itself is something which has come from local residents who have fought very hard, who, as I mentioned before, have led a strong campaign, over 2,000 signatures on a change.org petition, and have had numerous meetings with government members about this issue. So I'm confident that if council puts an innovative proposal supported by local residents, we may get over the line.
Before the second stands to speak, I think we just might need to change the last couple of words in that paragraph where it says, to this landmark site over the next few years, landmark site referring to future budgets. I think we need to change that because we can't make that sort of commitment. So we can just change the wording there, please, minute takers. Landmark site referring to future budgets.
If I can explain, Mr. Mayor, the future budgets can anyway override this requirement. When they set up the budget, council can place an intention referring that to the budgetary considerations.
If I'm correct, and I'll ask the question through you, Mr. Mayor, as a matter of a contract of sale with in relation to VicTrack, part of the contract could be that the council makes that commitment, that financial commitment to those sorts of works in future budgets. That would be a contractual commitment. The council would then not be in a position to break without a penalty. Am I correct in understanding that is available to us?
Yes, you can make that commitment, but that's not going to be a we need to speak to Big Track. They can, because it's not direct benefit to their coffers that they are responsible for. We have had this from other government lands. They had to go back to the Valuer General. This determination was made by the Finance and Valuer General. So, yep, you can put that in, but I'm just cautioning it's a better way of so that without Big Track we can commit. But if you want to put that as a part of the condition of contract, we need to consider that, but we'll come back to you on that.
If I'm correct, any correspondence or response from VicTrack would come back to council anyway before a final resolution. So,
Councillor Greco, second.
Mr. Mayor, for the sake of the debate, I've seconded it, but I'll reserve my right to speak and allow others to speak.
Any other speakers? Councillor Lee.
I just got a question, Mr. Mayor. It's actually on the $400,000 over the coming budgets. Can I just seek some clarification whether or not that would inadvertently prioritise this work over and above other identified priority capital improvement works?
That's the very reason. It's a convention, and usually council will refer to the council budget, because you need to look at all of them equally at the time of the budget when you are striking the rates. So that's the reason.
So if I just paraphrase what I just heard, there will still be a commitment of $400,000, but that will be in line with all the other priority projects. So you may or may not get in the next 1 or 2 years, or you might get everything done next year, depending on what the priority is.
Future council budgets can override that.
Okay.
Thank you.
Councillor Curtis.
Just a question. I'm not prone to asking questions, but this one's got me a little bit perplexed. What if we did nothing, Mr. Mayor? Can we get an answer from the relevant director?
If you really want the answer from the relevant director, I would ask Mr. Hamilton to answer. At the moment, there's a commitment from the VicTrack to give us a land with significant reduction in the valuation. So because of this, this is a similar issue to Ruthven, because community and the council have put a case. They're giving significant reduction, I think 92.5% reduction to the Valuer General, but if we don't do anything, they can't do anything with the land. They have offered to us. It might remain as public hand.
Well, on page 37, option one pretty much tells us what could happen.
I thank through you, the CEO, for that response. The fact of the matter is that nothing will happen to this land. And I just see this for what it is. This is their responsibility. Whether through custom and practice over a number of years, there's been some arrangement by which council crews have been maintaining it, to what extent, probably just a minimal consideration in relation to cutting grass, I would imagine. I think that's what put it in its proper perspective. The fact of the matter is it's open and accessible to all residents as it is now, not that there's much there anyway. But for the life of me, I just can't understand what the imperative is. And quite frankly, if we were to consider anything within the range between 100 to $500,000, and over the board estimates will probably be higher anyway, I can't see how this stacks up against any other priority within this city that has a better claim. Quite frankly, this is a Vic Roads reserve. Its stated status is that of a highway, if people know the history of this. Now, it's up to them what they do with it in the future. I wouldn't want this council signing on for this piece of dud land, because no one wants it. That's the fact, Mr. Mayor. That 1 million plus that you quoted before was illusory, because no developer could build on it. So, in terms of putting things in its proper perspective, let's get real here. Find me a nominated space either in Latrobe or Cazaly that has a better claim, because currently, as things stand, Mr. Mayor, I don't see a competing claim within Rucker that would suggest that there's a need for it, and I would encourage councillors to vote against it and reject it out of hand.
Thank you, Councillor Cedas. Councillor Villela.
I have to agree, Mr. Mayor. This is a completely different scenario to the Ruthven site. Completely different. They can't do anything with the land. So, therefore, it's a very cynical move, I think, to say, well, maybe council will buy, because we know council wants to buy some open space and the community there, are really into it, and they'll all that. But I think Councillor Cetus is actually calling it for what it is. It's just a money grab. Yes, it's bargain basement, but it's not really bargain basement because it's got no value. There is no value, and at the moment it's open space. So I'm sure that if the community, if we want to plant some stuff on there, VicTrack's not going to say no. So I actually think we need to be really honest about this. This money is better put into the Rudolphin site or into any other site that where there's a genuine sale, genuine demand, competing parties for some land, and there are other opportunities in Darebin where it would provide genuine open space which would otherwise be developed for the well-being of residents. This, Mr. Mayor, is I think actually sort of we're throwing money away. I can't see the added value. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor Lee.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm just proposing whether the mover and the second consider an alternate to this, which is to indicate Council's willingness to enter a lease agreement with the land while we should consider options
Councillor,
for...
could you speak up?
Sorry, the alternate is for Council to indicate his willingness to enter a lease agreement with VicTrack while consider various funding models for the purchase of the land. So essentially it's a hybridisation option 3 and option 1.
Option 3, page 37, is an alternative one we can consider, but it's pretty much in conflict.
It's a hybridisation of option 3 and 1.
It's in conflict with the original recommendation, so mover?
Well, I'm not sure in relation to accepting an alternative. It's not an amendment,
it's
so
not. It's completely different.
Unfortunately, I can't. I'd have to be withdrawing my motion.
That's correct.
The motion has been put in good faith based on consultation with residents, so I feel compelled to keep
debate.
it
Any
on the
further
table.
debate on the matter, on this item? Councillor Lawrence.
Yes, Mr. Mayor, I will speak in opposition to the motion as it's been put. I'll speak to another aspect to it, not the transactional aspect with VicTrack. But I feel uncomfortable with this mixing of apples and oranges in this motion, which is a commitment to ongoing open space spending in future budgets of another council, which we might never be part of, when the open space commitments are limited in that rate capping is not prioritising open space spending, and also the purchase money in our open space reserve is between 8 million and 12 million during this year, and that's limited. So there needs to be some kind of criteria of when we actually bring out the wallet and call their bluff, and we can't mix future budget spending on open space. That has to be done through a considered process.
Thank you, Councillor Lawrence. Any other speakers? Councillor Greco, you're going to be all
Mr.
right now.
I'm speaking in relation to this. Look, I seconded the motion for the sake of having a debate, and I think it's been well worthwhile that we've had this debate on this particular issue so that we could draw out all the various positions. And I must say, even though I've seconded the motion, I've been very impressed by the comments that have been made against the motion, because if we look at this, originally when I think we had put forward a proposal back to the state, we actually said, why should we pay, because it's sort of it. So, but again, for the sake of democracy, for the sake of debate, I was prepared to second the motion. So, so therefore, I know it's going to be CMOD, but it's because I have been listening to councillors. I'll be voting against this. But what I want to do is actually highlight a point, because the Reuben point was also mentioned. What strikes me here is that here, the Vic Roads, through the state government, is prepared to offer this land at 7.25% of the market value of the land, as if it was a residential development. I just wonder whether the state government would be prepared to offer Reuben and Lakeside at 7.25% of its market value, which I've done the calculation of this afternoon, which will come to less than $1 million instead of paying up to millions of dollars for what we're actually being proposed.
Thank you, Councillor Greco.
Before I exercise my right of reply, Mr. Mayor, I'll just ask through you to the CEO, assuming rightly, I think at this stage that this motion will not succeed, what then is the course of action in relation to the options that are
The
outlined
three
in the
listed
report?
on page
Is it incumbent upon this session of council to consider an alternative, or does the matter come back to us when councillors have a chance to have a think about it? Because we don't often move two motions on the same.
Mr. Mayor, I'll indicate that I'll be proposing an alternate motion should this motion not get carried.
If you can close the debate now on the matter.
In that case, if that's the course of action at this meeting, look, I appreciate councillors' comments. I was the one in this chamber last year, in fact, that made the case to say this is public land. It should be referred to council as the Crown land manager, very much like we had in relation to Merry Park and other parcels of land. We are in a particular moment in time here where we have an aggressive push by state government agencies, and Councillor Cetus made reference to this.
You need to rebut what was
and I would echo Councillor Cetus's point, and I would appreciate the point that this is a terrible process that they're undertaking, where they hold a piece of land that is well loved. I wouldn't use the word dud because I think it's well loved land.
It's a rebuttal. You're introducing new items.
That's fine. That's fine. But I would actually reject Councillor Cetus's reference to it being a dud piece of land, because it is well loved and people want to see it kept in public hands in perpetuity. And that is not, in fact, the promise of the current state government. That is not the promise of VicTrack. That is not the promise that we've been delivered by local members. And so I feel deeply uncomfortable thanking them for essentially putting us in a situation where our best effort might be to be able to lease the land for another 5 years, which on the surface seems like a good outcome, but it does not provide the ongoing protection which Councillor Greco and other councillors have talked about in other pieces of land. So I would reject some of the arguments that have been made in this chamber. If we are serious about actually holding these pieces of land and investing in them, then we need to work out how best to achieve that, and that was the proposal put on the table. I welcome an alternative. I don't want to see us let this one slide because it is too important, the future of that land, but also what it does in terms of a continuation of that Merry Creek corridor, and we need to protect this land in perpetuity, and we have to find a way to do it.
Thank you, Councillor. I'll put the vote to the recommendation on screen. All those in favour? Those against? That motion is lost.
I'll call a division, Mr. Mayor.
Division called. All those in favour of the recommendation on screen, please stand. I name Councillor McCarthy. And now Councillor Walsh.
No, I voted for it. I withdraw.
Did you? I beg your pardon. Okay, so Councillor McCarthy and Councillor Walsh. All those against, please stand. I name Councillor Lee, Williams, Cetus, Montana, Lawrence, Greco and Dalala. We have an alternative recommendation there, Councillor Lee.
I move alternative recommendation, Mr. Mayor, which is for council to indicate its willingness to enter into lease agreement as an interim measure. Point number one, and point number two, the council receives a further report on some continuing advocacy and other funding options for this land.
Mr. Mayor, can I ask a question just on that? It appears to dovetail a little bit with Councillor McCarthy's motion, which was just defeated. Can we get some clarification as to how does it distinguish? I mean, number 4, as it reads, has confused me. I mean, it either says it wants us to go into a buy, lease, or no cost. It can't be all three.
If I can.
Councillor Lee, can we hear your recommendation?
Where I'm uncertain with this is that we don't know whether VicTrack has placed any deadlines for us to enter an agreement with them for this land. If not, then I'm happy to pursue option 4 as an alternate option. If that makes things a bit easier.
That makes. But, Mr. Mayor, in all due respect to Councillor Lee on this, I'm confused what option 4 is trying to tell us. It can't be all three. It's got to be one. It's either saying that, a facilitation for, at the very least, a leasing option in paragraph 2, or that we advocate for no cost, which I'm assuming, if I'm not mistaken, is pretty much status quo as things stand now. If that's the case, I'm happy to second.
Well, I'm happy to second it just to keep the ball rolling, Mr. Mayor. So.
Well, what are we saying?
I want option 4. Precise, exact words.
Yeah, Mr. Mayor, with all due respect to Councillor McCarthy wishing second, I think I had the floor.
That's fine.
I deserve an answer. What does option 4? What is option 4 designed to do? What is it?
Continue advocacy.
Mr. Mayor, I think if you just remove second paragraph from option 4.
Well, it's not actually a recommendation.
No.
It's an option for us to consider to form a recommendation.
Yeah, sorry. If you just remove the paragraph, because that paragraph, the second paragraph, I agree with Councillor Sears, the second paragraph is contradictory. And I'm wondering whether it actually, maybe it's there by mistake.
It's not. No. Anyway, Councillor
Because
Lee,
it
are you
doesn't
going to
make
move the recommendation?
I'm moving option 4. If I get a second, I'll speak to it.
I'll second it if Councillor Lee is happy to excise paragraph number 2.
That is not accepted because that's actually the basis of option 4.
I don't get it.
Well, can we have the motion read just so that councillors are clear? And I'm happy to second it.
Hear the motion.
The motion is for council to pursue option 4, continued advocacy, as outlined on page 38 of this report.
We'll second it.
Look, I'm happy to second it, Mr Mayor, just to see the interpretation of that paragraph that I find
Seconded, Councillor Villela.
confusing.
Councillor Lee.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I think if everyone reads through that particular option 4 on page 38 of the report, hopefully things will become a little bit clearer. At the moment, as just indicated by our CEO, there is no pressure for us to either enter a lease agreement or to purchase that land that is deemed excess to surplus to use by Big Track. So we are in a unique position to undertaking a more comprehensive study as to what is the best outcome that we can get for our community for that parcel of land. It may well be that we may have to enter into some sort of lease agreement, at least as the interim, while a full purchase option or some sort of financing option could be considered. Under which case, Councillor McCarthy's option may well be considered. In other words, we pay a down payment of a small amount with a further commitment for years to come for council to upgrade or beautify or improve the capital value of that land in order to return that expenditure incurred by this council back to the community. So that, in light of the outright purchase or outright hire, is the best option, in my opinion, because as option 1 says, if we do nothing, there is a danger, unpalatable as may be, for Big Track to either neglect the land or actually refuse council access to that land, which will be a worse outcome, because that particular parcel of land, as Councillor McCarthy has said, is used extensively by cyclists, pedestrians and many other residents of Darebin, not only for recreational purposes but also for transportation and commuting purposes. So we do need some certainty around that land. While there is no certainty or no agreement at this point yet about the lease or the purchase, or indeed the purchase model and purchase price of that particular piece of land, the best we can do under the current circumstance is for a continued advocacy by this council so we can get the best deal for our community. Thank you, Mr Mayor.
Councillor Villela.
So, thank you, Councillor Lee. The way it reads then, I think what we're trying to say is that, and I think I'm speaking for it, is that the process, it's gone through the process of the Victorian Government's land sales policy. It's going through that process. So if we want to get some certainty around council being able to be responsible for that land and manage that land, it's going to require ministerial intervention. It's probably not going to happen because it's a precedent. So probably in order to get that certainty, which is what we want, I suppose, is to look at possibly leasing it for a peppercorn amount of $300 a year. That's probably the best outcome. Leasing it for $300, that way there is some certainty and we know who's taking care of it, how much it's going to cost, etc., etc. So I do take that point. And the advocacy that's referred to there is therefore the advocacy for the best possible outcome, which in my view would be at a bare minimum, you know, a $300 a year rental to rent the land. Yeah, so I'm happy with that generally, and happy to second it.
Thank you.
I'd like to speak against. I would draw councillors' attention just as a point of distinction from my earlier speaking against, from the alternative that was proposed by Councillor McCarthy. Draw councillors' attention to page 38 and under the heading of financial and resource implications. We're spending money now, and it is for maintenance and the like. Now, I doubt very much that Vic Track is going to say, we don't want your maintenance works. So I think that's a red herring with all due respect to the speakers who've addressed that issue. We don't need to even give them the nominal figure of $300. Why would we? And I go back to my original assertion that option 4 is contradictory. I mean, how plain can the language be when it says that it should be transferred to the Darebin Council at no cost to ratepayers? I can't see any ambiguity in that language. Leaving paragraph 2 out, it reinforces that notion at paragraph number 3, and yet, even on its plain reading, it's contradictory again. I would hope that the drafters of these options know what the full intent is, because I suspect that there would have been an option 5 otherwise. I mean, realistically speaking, the relegation or excision of paragraph 2 would have perfectly sat in an option 5, Mr. Mayor. That's my contention. And basically, paragraph 3 of option 4 would have been redundant altogether, because it doesn't need positive reinforcement of paragraph number 1 under option 4. That's my contention. So, at the end of the day, no matter how you want to cut it, both motions are repugnant, given the fact that we're already spending money maintaining it. So I say no.
Thank you, Councillor Seatis. Councillors, can we concentrate on the item, please? I'm wanting to deal with this matter pretty quickly. Councillor McCarthy.
I'm going to miss Councillor Seatis' presence in this chamber. I didn't get to say that before, but I'll say it now. Look, I think Councillor Lee has proposed a way forward which I think is entirely palatable given what we've heard so far in this chamber. And if councillors are true to the position that we voted on in this chamber last year when this proposal first came to us, along with a whole lot of other parcels, and we said this is public land, we want to keep it in public hands, and let's not give in to the money grabbing sort of desires of various agencies who proclaim, such as VicTrack does, that they're completely self-funded by land sales, but at the expense of Darebin ratepayers. All we have to look at is what happened to VicTrack's proposal at Alphington Station when they proposed to develop that station, develop accommodation and apartments at that station on top of a 400-year-old red gum and a community garden that had been planted there by the community 21 years before, and they proposed to put buildings on top of it. Now, the community fought that. They saved the Alphington bushlands, and there was a change of government, and because of the political heat that had been applied on that issue, there was a change in decision, the equivalent to a ministerial intervention in this case. So I do hold out hope, and I think Councillor Lee is on the money here, I do hold out hope that with sustained and continued advocacy on this issue, we may see a better option put on the table. It's not there at the moment, but we've had all sorts of curious things happen in the last couple of months. We had a federal member propose $20 million for a tram route that his government and his party didn't want to talk about for decades, or had promised to do it for decades and never did, I should say. So let's keep the advocacy online. The community's on board. They want to see this land in council's hands, and they want to see it and its conservation values protected and improved.
Councillor McCarthy. Councillor Greco.
After carefully rereading this again on the advice of Councillor Seatis, for me, I'm supporting the motion, and why I'm supporting the motion, because I read the first paragraph. The first paragraph is the key paragraph, because the first paragraph shows what the council intent is and what the council action is. That is, the action is about advocacy, and it's about advocacy to the local politicians about a permanent protection of the land, and I see there a possibility where the land will be granted to the council. The other two paragraphs are basically just statements. They're just making statements, but there's no action around that about what the council commitment is towards that to those particular points. So on that basis, I support what Councillor Lee has said, because again, I go back to the fundamental principle. This land is owned by Victorians, Victorian taxpayers. And as a result, why should the community pay twice for something that they already own? As Darebin residents, we already own this land by the state government. So to me, it's nonsensical. And I've also stated this when we had discussions around Reuben, that why should we be paying money for something that the community already owns? So on the basis of that principle, I think that that option 4 is the way to go, because that provides us an opportunity to advocate, and I'm sure that given in these political times where things are a little bit on the edge, things will shift a little.
Thank you, Councillor Rico. I might just add something to the debate now. He quite simply is, it's the first paragraph of option 4 which should form the recommendation. The other two items are simply there's information and additional comments. So I might...
So does that mean no cost equals no cost?
They're not going to take from us. They're going to want something, but we'll at least continue to advocate. That's our main concern. As has been debated.
Mr. Question. From our point, in terms of the import of passing Councillor Lee's motion based on 4, is that our starting point and finishing point is no cost.
We'll advocate that if it's necessary, but we know we're not going to get it. That's reality.
Position.
Councillor, you can close the debate.
I believe Councillor Lawrence wanted
No. Councillor Lawrence, do you want to speak?
No, I'm sure it'll come back.
Okay, I'll put that to a vote. You want to speak? For or against?
Look, I'll speak for. I think this is a with this one. I carefully considered every option, but it was actually by an argument which Councillor Greco had, and that swayed me. We do need to about this, because if it's owned by the state government, well, the land, people are already paying for the land in their taxes. So we should. So if they're paying for it in their taxes, they shouldn't have to pay for it in their rates as well. And who knows? We might not get anything, but there's no harm in continuing to advocate.
Thank you, Councillor Walsh. I'll put that to a vote. All those in favour? Those against? That item is carried. That becomes a new recommendation. Thank you, councillors.
Call division, Mr. Mayor.
Division called. All those in favour of the recommendation proposed by Councillor Lee, please stand up. I name Councillor Lee, McCarthy, Fontana, Lawrence, Walsh, Greco, Villala. Those against, I name Councillor Williams. Thank you, councillor. Next item we're considering is our 6.6, the 6-month progress report for community advisory committees with council representation. We have a recommendation there. Moved, Councillor Lee. Seconded, Councillor Villala. Councillor Lee.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. This is a regular 6-monthly update of all of our advisory committees of the council. Just for the benefit of the members of the gallery, the council has a number of advisory committees covering a whole range of issues, including environment, women's issues, youth issues, LGBTI issues, bike infrastructure, and disability services, and so forth. Every 6 months, these committees meet on a regular basis, usually once every 2 months or quarterly, and they discuss and advise the council on a range of issues that's been considered. For example, when we do upgrade the M40 pipeline along St George's Road, I know the bike committee was heavily involved in the consultation, and their advice is then brought before the council, which I know that the council value those particular expert advisory committee recommendations very seriously in conjunction with the officer reports as presented before us. So we do, in addition to support these services, that's one way that we engage with our active members of our community, because these committee members are sourced from our community from a range of localities, gender diversity, and youth and experience, and so forth. So this is one way the council continues to engage with our residents, and this 6-monthly progress report gives the council an update on the progress of these various committees. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Lee. Councillor Villala, a second, anything to add?
Nothing further to add, Mr. Mayor.
I would just make I would just speak. I believe I was also a proxy for the Disability Advisory Committee. I'm pretty sure, but I wasn't a. I was only a proxy, but I believe I should have been added as a proxy, but just a proxy, so nothing big. But yeah.
All right. Noted. Yeah. I'll put that to a vote. All those in favour? That's carried. Thank you, councillors. Next item we're looking at is 6.7. Identification of projects to be nominated for the Sports and Recreation Victoria Community Supports Infrastructure Funds. We have a recommendation there.
I I've got a couple of questions.
Can you stand up, Councillor Walsh? What are your questions?
One, what is the latest in terms of with the I guess both the Reservoir Leisure Centre and the Northcote Aquatic Centre in terms of the Better Pools program, and you don't think that we just so that we can hear in an open council, I guess, from the officers in relation to that, and do you think that do the officers think that Reservoir Leisure Centre and NARC would fit as would qualify in the Better Pools?
Well, Councillor Walsh, I can answer that. If you actually read the guidelines on the sports funding requirements, the categories as explained there cover the nominations or the recommendations.
It just sort of mentions the Better
What you're
Pools.
discussing is not applicable to what's being applied for.
Well, it does mention the Better Pools in the report, Mr. Mayor, with all due
Different
respect.
guidelines. Different guidelines. I'm happy to move the recommendation.
Move,
Mr.
Councillor
Mayor, if
Lee.
anyone else is-
I'll second it.
Councillor Lyons. Councillor Lee.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I refer councillors and members of the audience to page 48 of the report. What this program does is for council to apply for funding from Sports and Recreation Victoria on very specific projects, and there are 4 projects identified under 3 categories. The first is the major facilities category, in which the redevelopment of Bill Laurie Oval was identified at $3.3 million. 2 minor facilities upgrades for Pitcher Park sporting lighting upgrade, and also the Bandura Park sport for lighting upgrade, and also 1 for the cricket facility upgrade for the cricket nets at Preston City Oval. Altogether, we're seeking $900,000 from SRV in terms of the grant application. However, that is not a free money. If I can draw Council's attention to the council contribution in the next column, which is in the order of $2.28 million over the next coming years, because for every dollar that we seek from the government, the council would have to contribute significantly out of its own pocket, i.e. using ratepayers' money in redeveloping these 4 identified sites. I understand that some of those sites might be a bit bigger in terms of the dollar amount sought and the capital expenditure involved, but that's entirely consistent with our officer recommendations and also with our various adopted strategies in terms of sports and recreation and leisure. But also we do note that some of these sites are of state significance in terms of their requirements, and thus have a higher level of requirement for their grounds and maintenance and equipment upkeep and replacement than other sites which do not have that level of criteria. Thank you,
Thank you, Councillor Lee. Councillor Walsh, question?
No, I was just saying that I'd like to speak. But
Well, Councillor Segner can speak first. Thank you, Councillor Walsh. Councillor Walsh, Segner, you wish to speak?
Just briefly, Mr. Mayor, obviously these projects have been identified as most closely matching the priorities in those categories of major sporting facilities, and of course we have the minor sporting facilities and also the smaller cricket projects there. So these will be submitted, and each year we are called on to highlight some, and sometimes you succeed and sometimes you don't. Exactly. Sometimes you think the one you're nominating has no chance, and it in fact does come through. But Councillor Lee is quite right to highlight that when these major grants come through, they do then require major capital injection. With the case of Bill Laurie Oval, I would also note the $700,000 from other clubs, which is an added contribution. So, if we are successful in this 12 months, a new council would obviously look at that grant, if it was $650,000, and look at the co-contribution, and would still be free to make a decision based on that. But obviously, when you've got 2 sets of extra money coming in, it does make it come up the budget priority. So we hope that we succeed, but we'll see the results later on.
Any other questions?
Just a question, Mr Mayor, but I think Councillor Lawrence has clarified it for me. The recommendation does not lock the next council in its allocation of resources in the budget, does it? It doesn't mean that if we apply for it and it's successful, that we definitely go ahead with it.
Do you want to answer?
Or is it something determined that budget?
CEO, can you answer that specifically for the benefit of everyone?
Yep. It's even though the resolution is not very clear, it will be referred to the budgets at the time. If council wants to clarify, I suggest that something to the effect council resolve, because Councillor Vellala did have this discussion with me earlier today.
Yes,
it could be added if council so wishes. Council resolves that council should reconsider priorities and levels of council funding if any of these projects are unsuccessful in receiving applied funding.
Yes, I'm happy to.
If that's what the intention is, because it will be a combination of funding we will be getting later resources.
Yeah,
is that clear? That's
yeah.
clear. Okay.
So
thanks.
it will be form part of the recommendation if it's agreeable with the mover.
Yeah.
Could we hear
Could
those
you hear that
words?
again,
Because I
please?
don't think we're all clear on
To the effect, not necessarily same words, council could resolve, that council resolves the council to consider priorities and levels of council's funding if any of these projects are unsuccessful in receiving applied funding.
Is that clear?
So can I just ask then, just through you, Mr Mayor, just that whether that is replacing point 3 or is in addition to point 3, because point 3 of the recommendation indicates a consequential obligation for co-contribution to these projects, and that's also referred to further in the report as per an in-principle agreement. So my understanding, based on what we have in the report, is that by virtue of simply prioritising and applying for these projects, we are making a commitment to government that we will follow through. So I'm just concerned with us contradicting ourselves.
Councillor Lee.
Considered.
I'm not sure if it's appropriate whether I can just add a slight fourth dot point to the report, basically for the council to receive a further report once those grant applications have been finalised, so we know what's going on.
That's better. That's simple,
that's
to the
better.
point. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, we've had the mover speak. Councillor Lawrence, second, has spoken, yeah?
Oh, I'll accept it.
Yes, spoken.
You have spoken. Did you? Must have missed that. I must have missed it. Sorry about that. Yeah, the speakers. Councillor McCarthy.
I've actually just got a question, and it's not covered in the report, but which I'm a bit concerned about, is that particularly Bill Laurie Oval, where we've got 2 tenant clubs, and we're wanting to see a change and a shift in who participates in sport in this city, what the consequences are in the future if either of those clubs decides to not deliver the same range of activity that they currently do, or alternatively, if there is a requirement made by this council or elsewhere to improve... Is that a comment or a question? Well, it's a question about what, because we have a policy about improving women's participation in various sports,
yes.
And that's a policy priority, and here we have a premier ground, and I'd like to know whether women are going to be allowed to play on this ground or whether they're going to be shut out.
Already this year.
So can we propose that that in the motion, and I'm seeking advice then, that there is some recognition of council's policy around gender inclusion tied to our capital investment?
First of all, they have played there this year. They've been a much schedule with the Darebin Falcons, and I understand that the funding allocation, the external funding, which is very rare to receive these sort of figures, $500,000 from AFL and $200,000 Cricket Victoria, substantial funding. I can't recall in 18 years seeing those sort of figures contributed or considered for projects in our municipality. I would assume that some of their contributions to these projects would include a form of inclusion with women participation at these venues.
Well, can I?
Yep.
Yeah, we know that women's cricket is part of the itinerary at the moment. However, we also have a resolution, and we have signing a memorandum of understanding with various clubs about the gender participation. That is part of it already, but if you want to clarify that further.
I was just going to propose it would be a fourth point, which would be a fifth point, I should say. Fifth or fourth. It would simply be that council's co-contribution is contingent upon adherence to council's sports inclusion policy.
I don't think you can, Miss Governance Officer. Can you explain why?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, the report before us and the recommendation before us is purely in relation to the funding only, so you can't include other aspects that relate to the policy, so it's purely based on funding.
And in any case, we have to receive a report once the grants have been finalised.
In
which case, those issues might
I'll raise it then if it comes in this term then. So.
It's on bottom of page 48, second dot point, any funding secured will be financial council required to contribute, okay? If they're successful. We don't think they're going to be successful yet. We might miss out already.
Correct.
Councillor Walsh.
I'll speak in favour of this, and these are significant sites for the city and you know, we look at the ones which are a part of the four which we're applying for. And, obviously, Billowy Oval is a significant one, and being a Premier cricket club, and football is also there, played at a high level. I value having high level sport in the city, and I personally think it adds value to the city. And obviously the latest Australian cricketer plays for Northgate, so that demonstrates the potential for I think for Billowy Oval. I think that's why it's that in, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Walsh.
And also, it's on another matter, but just a range of these are part of a range of sport and rec programs which we are applying for to the state government for funds, and obviously a big one is the high ball facility, the multi-purpose sports stadium at John Kane.
20 seconds and stick to
another one.
Stick to that report, please.
As yet, despite state government promises before the election, they have not committed to any funding in that.
Thank you, Councillor Walsh. If there's no further debate, I'll put that to a vote with the additional point 4 for a further report to come to Council. All those in favour? That's carried. Thank you, councillors. Next item is 6.8, the 2016 Homemade Food and Wine Festival.
Yes.
Councillor Villara.
With an amendment.
We'll hear the amendment.
It was circulated today.
I've seen the amendment and I'm happy to support the alternate motion.
The amendment that was circulated is that point 1 of the recommendation to remain as is. Point 2 to be replaced by to endorse the establishment of a working party made up of sponsors to the festival, that is, participants, economic development, community development, arts department, DEC and interested councillors for a high-level strategic workshop or workshops on the future direction of the festival. And the reason why I'd like to replace that with what's there, and the recommendations suggest to endorse the establishment of a subcommittee of the Arts Ambassadors Reference Group. And I just don't think the Arts Ambassadors Group is probably, at this point anyway, something wrong, Mr. Mayor?
No, it's okay.
At this point anyway, is probably the best group to brainstorm and look at, you know, future directions for the festival, as because there are a few ideas listed there, considerations for the development. I think what's important is to have people who have been active in that space, who have been part of the organising of it, who have seen it grow from over the years, participants.
Sorry, you're debating it. We had a second, Councillor Greco.
Oh yeah, I was a second.
No, we have.
Keep going.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah, he has. Yeah.
Yeah.
2 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. You're with us.
Generous.
Thank you. So I think we're at a very important point with the Homemade Wine and Food Festival. It's successful. But there are a number of things due to ageing population. that need to be addressed, but also how do we facilitate its further growth? And I think that's what that is really critical. The Wine and Food Festival, Mr. Mayor, has got enormous potential, especially when you look at
20 seconds.
The framework of our tourism strategy, where food and food industries was highlighted in that report as an identity marker for Darebin. This can become something that really adds value to our tourism strategy and to Darebin more generally. I thank the officers for the report. It's very good.
Thank you, Councillor.
But I think it's better if we get people who are involved to go to the next stage of strategising.
Councillor Greco.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Look, I thank Councillor Villela for actually putting forward this alternate motion because I think it's very much needed in terms of having a re-look at the festival and to see how we can actually lift it to a completely different level to where it's come from. I think that the festival has really reached a turning point in that it has interested a wide cross-section of people in Darebin and even beyond Darebin, and that and like I said, we really need to move it up another level and actually revision the festival. Given its 11-year history, it started off as a very humble festival. It actually started off as an idea from the Darebin Ethnic Communities Council, and now at this point it's actually been taken over by the Darebin City Council, and it's a festival which actually goes to the actual identity and character of who we are in Darebin. It's one of those few festivals that actually is both intercultural in that many people from different cultural backgrounds participate, and also most important, it's an intergenerational festival. You get very young people, very young winemakers, to very old winemakers and people who prepare food. So it's got all those various elements, and I think there's a big appetite, if you like, and pardon the pun, for these types of festivals. We see that the enormous interest that there's been in festivals like the Salami Festival, which is held here in the city of Darebin. And a festival like this, I think, can have enormous potential. And I think we really need to strategise, as Councillor Villela has said, with our partners, and actually think of the festival as something even bigger than Darebin. We've limited the festival to Darebin participation, but this could be a festival which is actually one of those, not the only one obviously, but one of those signature festivals for our city, and I really look forward to this strategic workshop.
I think it will potentially become an advisory committee now to track Mr. CEO, is that correct? Yes. I think it's probably where it's heading, I think. Thank you. All right, councillors, I'll put that to a vote. All those in favour? That's carried. Thank you, councillors. Sorry, Councillor Wallace, you wanted to speak? I cut you short. Sorry about that.
No.
Next item is item 7, consideration of responses to notice of motion. We have nothing there.
Nothing.
We'll go to item 7.1, Bedford Road Car Park Reservoir. There's a recommendation there to note the report. Any other comments?
I just had a question. I'm not sure whether, because I haven't had a chance to look at my emails late this afternoon, but I had a question in relation to the Bedford road car park, is to know how many traders along Broadway were actually consulted in regards to this.
Mr. Hamilton, I think you provided that answer. Can you provide it again now, please?
Yes, through Mr. Mayor. So my understanding is that all traders between Hyde and Whitehall were consulted, majority face to face. If they weren't present, then we had a letter that was circulated as well. So essentially all traders in that precinct were consulted.
Thank you for that. We have a recommendation there. Someone move it, please. Anyone? Councillor Siddis, seconded. Councillor McCarthy. If there's no speaker to it, I'll put that to a vote. All those in favour? That's carried. Thank you, councillors. Pardon me. Next items we're considering are the notice of motion, commencing with 8.1. being the former Ruthven Primary School and Lakeside Secondary College. Councillor McCarthy.
Happy to second it, Mr. Mayor.
Second, Councillor Villela.
Councillor McCarthy. Mr. Mayor, I thought Council had already taken the vote on this in recent times.
No.
Well, sort of, but no. It's a caretaker period where we're considering it.
It's different.
Move it. It's slightly different. Councillor McCarthy.
Thank you, Mr Mayor, and I'll clarify for Councillor Cetus. This arose from, foreshadowed this motion at the last council meeting, whereupon the proposal was raised to set a time frame which was limited in fact till previous to now, to in fact complete any transaction with the state government to purchase both the former Ruthven Primary School and the relevant sections of Lakeside Secondary College. That motion, which I think was Councillor Lawrence's motion, didn't get up, but at the time I foreshadowed moving a motion to this effect, which would essentially say that this council makes a commitment to securing title to both properties before we enter the caretaker period. And that's really important because whilst there is the fast-track government land sales process currently underway, and there's those sorts of processes which are outside of our consideration, the community is looking for a commitment from council in relation to these two parcels of land, and they want to see us put money on the table, and we've of course gone through this process already in the chamber, but this ties council to that commitment by saying we will make that happen before we enter the caretaker period. So it sends a very clear signal to the community that we're serious, and of course it provides guidance to our negotiation team in relation to securing that title. I won't say much more. I think we've talked a lot about these two issues, but I don't want us to lose sight of the lakeside land, which is the Merry Creek frontage, which is easily lost because it's the smaller parcel. So I would like to just put the message in there again that it's about two pieces of land here, not just the Ruthven site.
So just a question for you, Mr Mayor. Council's previously passed an in-camera motion regarding the purchase and negotiation of this site, which had dollar amounts. This motion has no dollar amounts, but now
it's got nothing to do with dollar amounts.
Now has a deadline. Does this supersede the dollar amounts that have been passed previously?
No.
I don't think so, Mr. CEO. It doesn't.
No, it doesn't rescind any part of that. But in addition to that, just one comment about it. Even one hand, an agreement is a two-party matter. So in terms of council is committing to do that, which we will let them know and negotiate with them.
Second, I want to speak to it, Councillor
Look,
Vella.
I just think the negotiations for the purchase of land and does take a while. These things don't happen overnight, especially when there are a few different parties involved. But we still need an end point. I mean, I think that it's important that those who are negotiating, the community, councillors, all the parties, realise that caretaker mode setting in. We do need to have a deadline at some stage, and this just gives the officers that I suppose the authority to insist that we speed up negotiations because of the extraordinary situation that we're in with caretaker mode. Coming ahead in, is it October? In October. So the community needs to know beforehand, we need to know beforehand, and I think it's actually a fair and reasonable timeline because this has been in discussions now for over a month, probably more, so we're not being unreasonable. Thank you, Mr Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Vella.
An additional question then, really, because the motion's unclear to me. So if there's a failure on the state government to reach an agreement for whatever sum, the secret sum that we're putting forward, on that date, and we enter into caretaker mode, then what is the actions open for council?
Well, I think the motion delegates the CEO to deal with the matter. Councillor Lawrence, I think that's pretty clear.
Well, point of order, Mr Mayor, that's a false statement. That's the previous motions did that. This motion is just about a self-imposed one-side deadline.
Okay. Mr. CEO?
I think the resolution is committing council to that date.
Is what, sorry?
Committing the council rather than placing a deadline. It's committing a council to that deadline. But as I said before, agreement is two-party matter, but we will certainly, Mayor, and I will let the government know that we have commitment from the council wanting to do that before that particular day.
MPs are sick of talking with me at the moment.
I'll move an amendment then, Mr Mayor.
Can we hear it?
Yes. Before the word before which is in the second paragraph, that we just insert 1 week before council enters the caretaker period in September.
So how would that read?
1 week before.
1 week, the council commits to securing an agreement to purchase the former Ruthven Primary School site and the relevant sections of Lakeside Secondary College 1 week before council enters the caretaker period in September.
Mover happy with that?
No, look, it's a redundant amendment.
Yes or no?
So no.
No,
It's,
Okay, seconder? No seconder? That's it's lost. It's lapsed. Any further debate or comments on the matter?
Yes, Mr Mayor, I'll speak against.
Let's hear it. You've got 2 minutes.
Okay. I just moved that amendment just to test the sincerity in this room, whether this was window dressing or in fact a serious attempt to negotiate.
Councillor Ryan, you need to speak to the notice of motion.
I'm speaking to it. In fact, it's insincere because if it isn't completed, there's no time for the council to consider an extra $200,000, an extra $100,000, an extra $1. It's a very transparent bit of window dressing.
Thank you, Councillor Lawrence. Councillor Sedas.
I'd like to speak against Mr Mayor. Now, just to change a little bit of tack, and I've used this point before, but I'll just restate it to give him time, the allotted speaking time. You know, I've spoken previously against, in relation on the basis of an equity argument in relation to these considerations, and Mary was proof positive of where I stand on these issues. Look, if you want to map the city of Darebin in terms of its open space quotient, Latrobe is at the apex compared to any other ward in the city of Darebin. So I don't get the requirement to buy this land, and I've stood against it for that particular reason. The other thing it probably begs in my mind is a revision of the policy where, in all instances, it appears, a blanket requirement for 500 metres approximate location for residents to open space. I think that's a nonsense. Have a look at the map of Latrobe. Look how many green spaces there are. There is absolutely no ward that comes near Latrobe. So, quite frankly, I think in the context of Latrobe, if we were to look at a tailoring per ward, we'd be looking at over 1,000 metres, Mr Mayor, and I'll leave it at that.
Thank you, Councillor Sedas. Any other speakers? Councillor Greco? No, you've spoken. No, you may speak.
Yeah, thank you, Mr Mayor. Look, I was speaking in favour of this motion. I just had another proper read of it again, and I think what the motion does and is that, as again, if you just read it, it commits to council securing an agreement, to purchase the two sites before we enter into a caretaker period. And I think it's important that we make that commitment, and we make that commitment public, in that because I think the community wants certainty. One of the big issues that we faced in this whole campaign about these two sites is that the community was, what was up in arms about these sites because they didn't know what was happening. And also all the consultations that the state government was holding and things like that, it actually confused the community more and created greater uncertainty in the community. So I think that if we can come to a rapid agreement with the other parties, and it takes two to tango here. I mean, all we're doing is saying that we want to see an agreement reached before the caretaker period, because I think it's incumbent on this council that's taken on this campaign that we leave this this council with that particular item wrapped up as best as possible, and not leave it dangling or hanging over to the next council. So I commend this motion, because what it's expressing is our intention to actually secure the land, lock it in for community benefit.
Thank you, Councillor Greco. Now, Councillor McCarthy, you can close the
I'll
debate.
be really quick.
Straight to the vote.
I've got to refute a couple of the what I think are pointless and ridiculous statements that have been made. and I would just draw councillors' attention back to the previous meeting where an arbitrary deadline was proposed of, I think, the 27th of July from memory, that council would need to get a resolution. It was unreasonable and unrealistic, and would have sent us down the path of, in fact, not getting a resolution to this situation at all. Ideally hope that we will. We are, by virtue of adopting this motion, if we do, saying to the community we will do our level best within our power, as long as we have a willing partner, as has been pointed out, to sell the land to us, we'll do everything we can to buy the land. And that's what the community has demanded of this council. The suggestion that, that people around the Ruthven site should not benefit from the commitment this council made in 2007-2008 to ensure open space within 500 metres of each resident. If we go back on that, then we are denying, I think, a group of people, in fact 2,000 people around the Ruthven site, from the environmental and open space amenity that other residents have come to love and enjoy. It would be an enormously missed opportunity. We have a great park there, which we will create with council money, and we will turn into a wonderful place for local residents to enjoy, and we should be doing our level best in the time we have available to secure that. So I think councillors know where this has come from, and they know that if we don't make a decision and a commitment to do this, then our community would be right to say, come October, you did not follow through on your commitment. So I really hope councillors do change their minds and vote for this, and show that we are united in securing their sites.
Thank you, councillors. The debate is closed. I'll put that to a vote. All those in favour? Those against? That's carried. Thank you, councillors.
I'll call a division, Mr. Mayor.
All those in favour, can I ask the hand, please? I name Councillor Lee, McCarthy, Williams, Fontana, Walsh, Rico and Dalala. Those against? Councillor Lawrence and Councillor Cetus. Thank you, councillors. Next item, notice of motion 8.2, Resco provisions, seconded by Councillor Lee.
Mr. Mayor, I'd like to seconded
Councillor Cetus.
With the suggestion of an amendment. I think we're on the right track, but we should like to consider a specification of 3 and above, because that actually gives us at least a benchmark of what high yield constitutes.
Look, I'm reluctant to do so, just because we don't want to be too specific in that, because that is something that is within the state planning framework. So I agree with the intention of that, but unfortunately I'm reluctant to receive it, just because the fact that it is too prescriptive.
Councillor Cetus still have a second though, yes?
Yeah.
Thank you.
Can I propose before Councillor Lee just a one-word change, which might clarify?
Yes.
In point 2, Victorian, I think, should be metropolitan.
Yes, Northern Victorian. Yes, Northern Metropolitan. Yes, thank you for picking that up.
Otherwise, there'll be some confused members.
There might be some up in the valley. Yes, I agree. Look, thank you, Councillor Cetus and also Councillor McCarthy. This issue probably should come as no surprise to councillors. I've been fighting this issue of reverse living apartments for the better part of this term, and this issue was really crystallised about 6 months ago, when a plan application on Wood Street was approved, because the applicant not only sought to have reverse living apartments, but they provided no front yard, no backyard, but an 8 square metre balcony space, and that was deemed compliant under the state planning regulations. So we wrote to the planning minister asking to rectify this issue, because this is a serious planning flaw, a loophole, as I called it at the time, that developers seeking to exploit in order to drive up yield-driven high-rise developments and reverse living apartments, which Councillor Cetus is also not a fan of, I understand. Well, we received a formal reply from the Honourable Richard Wynne, and I'd like to read three particular aspects of it, and that has actually been circulated to all councillors. He said, and I quote, "To specify decision guidelines about private open space, access and living areas to be provided at ground level in circumstances is quite restrictive." Well, my response is that any restriction we can place on planning loopholes is to be welcomed. The Minister further went on to say, "Therefore, I'm not persuaded that there is a need to amend the private open space provisions." Well, my notice of motion now says perhaps the Premier can be persuaded, or indeed the opposition leader can be persuaded, because this is a serious loophole that places the residential amenity of our residents and that of other Victorians at risk. The Minister finally said, and this is the final clincher, it's open to the Council to undertake its own strategic work in relation to the impact of residential development on existing neighbourhood character of municipality and identify areas where further guidance is required. Well, the problem actually lies in the state planning framework, not within our council framework. We've done all we can. The ball is squarely back in the state government's ballpark, and we need the planning minister to intervene. He is reluctant to do so, as he said. So I'm now seeking higher powers from the Premier and perhaps opposition leader to join us to fight and protect the residential amenities of our residents. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Second, Councillor Souders.
Mr. Mayor, look, I think in terms of our decisions, even at Planning Committee, we've been pretty consistent. But a point of differentiation is, of course, a horses scenario. So I've been at pains in terms of at least qualifying my position to reverse living in the circumstances in which we see a one-way movement towards that kind of development coming before Planning Committee for its consideration. That's not on. We're all for a kind of pluralism associated with the kind of housing developments that come before the Council for its consideration. So in that context, to have a mixed scenario, we've actually supported. Not where, for instance, there's a malapportionment in one development where they're all reverse living. Correct. That's not on. The anomalies that Councillor Lee points out are ones that I share too. Now, interestingly, if the Minister is actually putting it back on Council to articulate visions blended associated with how it responds to these kind of developments, then I suspect it will receive the same sort of fate that now has beset, planning amendments 136 and 137. So let's just put our advocacy in its proper context, Mr. Mayor. Yes. So at the end of the day, Councillor Lee is correct. This actually exposes the kind of leeway that is embedded within the state planning framework. Make no mistake. But I'm not here to say that in all instances we should be opposed. But I did make this one valid point. The unintended consequence of not checking the spread of reverse living arrangements is that it disenfranchises elderly residents who might stay within Darebin, who might choose to buy in Darebin. Yes. They can't walk upstairs forever. Yep. So who are you catering for by allowing the spread of reverse living arrangements?
Separate matter altogether, but anyone take on board. Councillor McCarthy, something new, otherwise I'll put
very something new. Look, I'm trying to visualise and picture the Planning Minister's desk, because I think there might be a stack of documents from the City of Darebin that are seeking endorsement at some stage, and I'll just go through them for councillors, because right down the bottom there is one that we moved through this chamber a number of years ago, or sought, which of course is C136 and C137. Yep. Moving ahead, we have, of course, our preferred zones, which of course we did not receive. We got something slightly better than what Matthew Guy offered. And now what we have, and I would make the point, Mr. Mayor, now what we have is the latest incarnation, which is, that is within my power, but I'm going to hand it back to you and you do the work. Well, when we do the work, it ends up on his desk. So if it's a form of recycling, Mr. Mayor, then that's what's going on here. Because simply we do the work, it finds its way onto the minister's desk. It finds its way onto the minister's desk, and it sits there. So I'm concerned if we were to take up the minister's recommendation here and actually do the work, it would make the pile so big that the minister could find himself completely covered in paper, and I think that's a dangerous thing for the minister. So what I prefer is that we get behind Councillor Lee's proposal. I would also make the point, though, that and I know Councillor Lee mentioned Northern Victoria MPs. I would say this is not just limited to Northern Victoria, or Northern Metropolitan, I should say. So maybe we actually need to be communicating with all members of Parliament, because it's a much bigger issue than just what's happening here in the north, even though we have not been given our planning controls.
I'm sure he's looking forward to receiving another letter from Darebin, that's for sure.
I'm sure he is.
Councillor Villela.
Just a question through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Lee. Just wondering whether we're aware of other councils that might be having the same view on this matter. Is it something
I don't know if Councillor Lee can answer that.
I'll probably defer that to officers, because they're in professional communication with their colleagues.
Well, we're not aware of other councils.
From what I'm aware of, we're not unique.
Okay, we're not unique.
Councillor Walsh?
I can answer part of it. I was having a discussion with
I'd rather you focus on this
some councillors at Stonington on the weekend, and they were concerned about this issue as well in Stonington. I'll say that I think Councillor Lee is right, and you know, I was actually going to say we're not unique, and this is an issue that's facing a lot of cities in the state, and we do need to you know, when we do need to make sure that we're you know, not building the slums of the future. I think that's another point. No, and on Councillor McCarthy's point, I wouldn't want the minister to get lost in all the paperwork. I wouldn't want Dick Wynne to end up like Tim Holding and get lost.
Thank you, Councillor Walsh.
Just very quickly, Mr. Mayor, look, I rise because I really want to speak in relation to this, because I think it's a very important point that that Councillor Lee has raised, and I know that he's been battling on this issue for some time now, and we've done our very best to try and get the minister's ear to actually listen to what we've been saying, and because, you know, what's been said, you know, makes all sense, and it's a very logical thing, and I'm flabbergasted how now it's been pushed back to us. As Councillor Cedars said, this is the consequence of reverse living, right? As a result of reverse living, which increases yield, then you have these loopholes are found. Because if you don't have reverse living, then these loopholes will have no consequence whatsoever. And I believe that the council is tried to do the right thing. We've really tried to do the right thing within our powers. This is beyond our powers, and actually we're calling for the minister. If the minister is not going to listen, well, as you would normally do in any dispute, you escalate it up to the next level. The next level, unfortunately or fortunately, is the Premier, and the Premier is a very logical man and a very reasonable person, and I think that if we bring it to the attention of the Premier, something could be done. And just on the final point, which again, which is ironic, is that this very planning minister actually initiated, which I thought was very good action, about revisiting some of the design features of apartment buildings in Melbourne and in Victoria, and re-looking at them, because there was a lot of developers who just tried to make all sorts of yield kills in relation to that. And here we have a situation presenting to the minister an anomaly where you would think that he would agree with. Instead, he's just shunned it back towards us, which makes a mockery of that committee that he had set up to re-look at design aspects of new apartments.
Thank you, Councillor Gregor, and nearly on time too. For the benefit of the gallery, reverse living is when the living quarters are upstairs and the bedrooms are downstairs. It's not when you walk into the house backwards, because some have mentioned it to me in the past, okay? I'll put that on to a vote. All those in favour? That's carried. Thank you, Councillor.
You notice unanimous, please.
We note that is unanimous by the minute takers. Thank you. Next item we're looking at is item 8.3, the expression of interest to purchase 342 High Street, Northcote. Is this matter complete though? There's no figure there.
So I'm happy to put a number there, Mr. Mayor. I've been receiving various advice about whether this can be heard
moved by Councillor McCarthy. Seconder.
So
can we hear the number?
Amendment. Your amendment. Sorry.
Oh, sorry. The number. Yep. So I would place the number of $4 million in relation to that property.
Do we have a seconder?
Can I propose an amendment?
We haven't got a seconder yet.
There's a seconder, yeah. Seconder to Councillor McCarthy's. No seconder, that lapses.
Actually, I'm happy to second it for the purpose of debate.
It's too late, Mr. Mayor. The motion has lapsed.
I believe so.
You have been declared lapsed.
That motion is lost, so that matter will not proceed as an item for consideration tonight. Next item we're looking at is 8.4, expression of interest to purchase 71 to 75 at Gilbert Road, Preston. Councillor McCarthy, you wish to include a figure with...
I'll include
put an amendment.
Well,
Councillor McCarthy.
I'll include the figure of 3.2 million.
Thank you. Do we have a seconder for that item? I'll ask one more time. Do we have a seconder for that item? Councillors, if there's no seconder, that item has lapsed. It won't be considered this evening. Thank you, councillors. Members of the gallery, that concludes our notice of motion. We now go to urgent business. Sir, any urgent business?
None tonight.
None tonight. Item 10, general business. Any general business item? Nil. Are there any petitions from councillors? Item 11 tonight, councillors. Any petitions? There are none.
Sorry, I have a petition, Mr Mayor.
Have a petition?
Yep. I have a petition. I'll read it out for councillors. It may be redundant, I think, in this course of this council term, and there's the words for councillors for their benefit as well. The petition is... I'll read the petition out just for the purposes of the minutes. The title of the petition is Save Darebin's Heritage and Create 2 New Arts Hubs. We, the undersigned community, wish to inform the Darebin Council that 2 historic buildings are for sale in Darebin and both may be demolished for apartments. Darebin Councillors are meeting on Monday the 1st of August to consider purchasing these heritage-rich properties, the London Chartered Bank at 342 High Street, Northcote, and the former Rivoli Theatre at 71 Gilbert Road, West Preston. We ask that the Darebin City Council buys these buildings with the intention to create 2 new local arts hubs.
Point of order. I know the preamble, but where are the signatures?
Yeah. The signatures are all here, and under the governance local law, councillors are required to be provided with a copy of the petition, but the copy with the signatures can be provided just for the minute taker or for the governance officer.
Just a further point of order, Mr Mayor. I thought petitions were done at the start of the meeting, not at the end.
Oh, we've done it at the end. It's already been changed it a while ago. Anyway.
I would ask, I've got a point of order. When has it ever been, when has this ever been the practice that named addresses and signatures are taken away? They've always been part of. I'm pretty sure in order for them to be admissible, they do need to have them, and as councillors, we. In order for it to be accepted, for past
well, we need to move to accept the petition. Start with Councillor McCarthy has already read it, so if Councillor McCarthy has moved a petition, do we have someone to second accepting it tonight?
I'm happy to second it.
And we've actually heard most of it now, so we're going to go into...
Oh, yes, so I'll table the rest of it, Mr Mayor.
Yeah.
Can I, Mr Mayor, can I get an answer to my question?
What's your question, Councillor?
Where are the names and addresses? We have no idea who, how many people have signed it. I've seconded it because I feel it's the right thing to do. But I would like to I'd like to see a copy of the petition, and as has always been the case.
Thanks for your question. Let me finish the procedure first, Councillor Walsh. First of all, Councillor McCarthy has moved. You've seconded to include the item as a petition, so I'll put that to a vote first. All those in favour?
So, that was for the petition to be accepted?
To be included, yes. That's right. Yep. All those in favour? To accept it, yes. Okay. Now, Councillor.
Councillor, Mr Mayor, I'm abstaining. I haven't seen the signatures.
That's fair enough.
So, if I'm correct, and I'll get clarity from our governance officer, there is, with petitions, we are not obliged to have to provide paper copies of every page.
Correct.
And I think Councillor Williams made that point at a previous meeting. I'm happy to be clarified, but it goes directly to the CEO.
Yep.
And so...
Mr Mayor, am I having my abstaining as my right?
Councillor McCarthy speaking. Can I hear him finish speaking first, Councillor Lawrence? Councillor McCarthy.
So just in relation to the relevant motion, would be that the petition be referred to the Chief Executive Officer for consideration and response. Yeah. So that would be the relevant motion in this case. So I'll move that one.
Okay. And second for that is? Councillor Lower. Thank you very much. Councillor McCarthy's already spoken.
I think it's pretty straightforward, Mr Mayor. The residents have taken the time to collect several pages of petitions.
Yep.
They've included an attachment.
Yep.
And I think we owe them to be heard. So,
right. I'll put it to a vote. All those in favour? Carried. Oh, sorry, those against? Those abstaining?
I'm abstaining.
Councillor Lawrence is abstaining. That's accepted. Okay. Any more petitions from councillors?
No, Mr Mayor.
No. Thank you. Item 12, records of assemblies of councillors. They're noted in the report. So I'll move that, please.
Second.
Move Councillor Lee. Second, Councillor Williams. I'll put that to a vote. All those in favour? That's those against. Carried.
Abstain.
Next item is item 13, reports by mayors and councillors. Someone move that, please. Move Councillor McCarthy, second Councillor Greco. All those in favour? That's carried. Councillors can I please remind you of including reports. Several councillors have not done so. If you do hand them in late, they'll be recorded in the next meeting. Item 14, consideration reports confidential. Mr. CEO, any confidential reports? None. And that concludes tonight's meeting. Members of the gallery, you can vacate. Councillors, you need to stay behind with the briefing and here right now. You'll join us for refreshments very soon.